The executives of Nexus Dynamics, comfortable and arrogant, were too busy plotting sabotage to even recognize their founder. When Ariana Freeman, the majority owner, was told to wait her turn in the hallway, their disrespect became the perfect legal justification. She didn't send a memo. She walked into the boardroom, not to talk, but as the judge, jury, and executioner of a leadership team that never saw her coming. The story is just getting started. If you stand against racism and injustice, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Ariana Freeman sat in the deep executive chair, the polished glass of the wall reflecting the meeting she couldn't yet join. She was not a woman accustomed to waiting, especially not for men she paid, yet here she was, observing. The current chief operations officer, Dominic Keller, was inside, mid-laugh, gesturing expansively with a wrist that flashed expensive metal. Next to him, Miles Graham, the CFO, was nodding along, his focus clearly on Dominic and not on the massive financial binder in front of him. This was the leadership she had trusted with her creation. For 5 years, Ariana had been the strategic shadow, the unseen hand guiding Nexus Dynamics' explosive global expansion from her base overseas. She was the one who secured the majority shareholder position, turning the original startup into a powerhouse. The daily grind, the personnel, the budgets, the internal culture, she had delegated, believing the foundation was strong enough to sustain itself. She had promoted Dominic and Miles, seeing ambition, mistaking it for dedication. Her goal was always forward motion, building the external empire, assuming the internal structures would be managed with the same integrity she instilled at the start. They were the stewards, she was the architect. But during her years of absence, she had become a myth, a piece of corporate history rather than a living authority. To the current guard, Ariana Freeman was a signatory, a required line on a legal document, a name at the bottom of a quarterly earnings report, nothing more. They calculated her return based on calendar dates and stock movements, never anticipating an unannounced visit, stripped of the usual layers of security and assistance. They assumed her distance implied disinterest, that her majority stake meant only passive financial backing, not active, decisive command. Watching them now, in their comfortable, insulated bubble, the cold reality crystallized for Ariana. The soul of the company she had built on grit, lean operations, and relentless accountability had been hollowed out. She saw not the dedication of founders, but the self-serving arrogance of temporary custodians. The casual disregard shown by the young assistant Alara when she was told to wait, the unchecked laughter of Dominic and Miles, it was all proof. The company's heart had been replaced by a soft core of entitlement, a dangerous complacency that assumed power came from tenure and title, not from the hard work she was watching them neglect. This wasn't just a failure of management. It was a fundamental betrayal of the culture, and Ariana realized she was no longer here just to hold a meeting, but to execute a necessary purge. The clock on Ariana's minimalist watch read 11:03 a.m. She had arrived at 11 a.m. and had been waiting for 3 minutes, allowing the necessary time for the administrative staff to process her arrival and for the executives to be informed. Instead, she had been dismissed, told to wait, and then ignored. At 11:04 a.m., the boardroom door creaked open, and a junior executive named Corbin stepped out, his eyes glued to his phone as he walked toward the water cooler. He was dressed in the slightly too tight suit of a man recently promoted, believing his current minor status was permanent. He bypassed Ariana without slowing, then registered her presence peripherally. He gave her a brisk, dismissive glance, the kind of look reserved for vendors or unsolicited salespeople, before turning his attention back to his phone. He offered no apology for the delay, no inquiry as to who she was, and certainly no offer to check on the status of the crucial planning meeting. Ariana felt the last flicker of her innate patience extinguish. It was not the insult that stung, but the indifference. This young man, Corbin, had adopted the arrogance of the men inside, without having earned any of their titles, reflecting the toxic culture that had trickled down from the top. The 5 minutes she had allowed was not a request for their time. It was a window for their respect. They had failed that test. Her calm observation transformed into a cold, precise fury. This was not the sudden, explosive anger of a wronged ego. but the calculated, surgical anger of an engineer finding a catastrophic structural flaw. Every second she had sat there, every second she had been ignored, had simply fortified her resolve. The initial plan had been to observe the meeting, ask difficult questions, and perhaps schedule a review. The new plan was immediate, absolute, and terminal. The only thing left to do was stand up and execute. The 5-minute clock had run out. Ariana didn't knock. She simply pushed the heavy, custom-built door wide open, stepping across the threshold with a deliberate, smooth movement that conveyed instant authority. The sound of the door hitting the stop silenced the room instantly. The laughter that had been ringing inside, that easy, self-satisfied sound of men who believed they owned the time, died in their throats. Dominic Keller, who had been leaning back and gesturing wildly, froze. Miles Graham snapped his head around, his eyes going wide with confusion. Orion Sterling, the chief of staff, who was now rushing back from the coffee station, stumbled, spilling a hot stream onto the carpet. Who the hell let her in? Dominic demanded, his voice dropping from bluster to a low, tight growl. He didn't recognize her, but he instantly recognized that she did not belong there. Security is supposed to vet every outsider. Sterling, who is this? Orion Sterling, pale and sweating, could only stammer, I don't know, sir. She was just outside. Ariana ignored them all. Her gaze was not on the frantic faces, but on the destination, the head of the long executive table, the seat. She moved with an unhurried, almost regal pace. She wore a dark, perfectly tailored suit, not a power suit, but the uniform of someone who has no need to prove their power. I need to know who this woman thinks she is, Miles Graham muttered, starting to rise from his chair with the intention of stopping her. We are in the middle of a private executive session. You need to leave. Now. Ariana reached the end of the table. She paused, her hand resting on the back of the massive executive chair. In that single, drawn-out moment, the executives finally had a chance to truly look at her, not as a fleeting presence in the hall, but as a figure dominating their space. They saw the unwavering confidence in her stance, the unreadable control in her eyes, the familiar facial structure they'd only ever seen reproduced in grainy annual report photos. The recognition hit Dominic Keller first. It was a physical blow. He didn't gasp or shout, but the color drained from his face with horrifying speed, leaving a sickly gray. He didn't just recognize her face. He recognized the look of a person who had calculated his ruin. The other executives caught the sudden, panicked stillness in Dominic and looked back at the chair. It wasn't just the chair. It was the chair with the specific, subtly different contour, the one that the founder, the majority shareholder, had designed and reserved for herself. No, Orion Sterling whispered, a sound of absolute dread as the truth dawned. It can't be. Ariana finally pushed the chair in and settled into the seat, taking possession of the meeting, the room, and the company with a silent click of the leather. The absolute shift from casual dismissal to stunned, nervous recognition was complete. The room was utterly silent, save for the frantic pounding of their own hearts. They had made the founder of Nexus Dynamics wait outside her own office, and now she was sitting down to render judgment. Ariana leaned forward slightly, her posture impeccable and controlled, her hands resting flat on the cool surface of the table. The silence in the room was brittle, a sudden, terrified vacuum where arrogant noise had just been. Her voice, when it came, was measured and low, yet it carried the undeniable authority of facts. She didn't shout. She simply delivered the precise reality of their situation. For 5 minutes, I waited in the hallway. I am the co-founder, the principal visionary, and the majority shareholder of Nexus Dynamics. She paused, letting that title settle like a weight on their chests. Yet, a junior staff member, who, understandably, did not recognize me, was instructed to make me wait outside because this crucial planning meeting was in session. Dominic Keller, pale but trying to regain control, finally spoke. Ariana, this is an unfortunate miscommunication. It was a failure of the staff. We can correct this. We can reschedule. It was not a failure of the staff, Mr. Dominic. Ariana cut him off, her tone sharp and precise. It was a spectacular failure of leadership. The staff simply executed the culture you have fostered. A culture where the people responsible for stewardship, for ensuring the legacy of this company, have become so detached, so focused on their own internal comfort, that they don't even know the face of the person who pays their salaries and holds the controlling interest. She didn't allow him to interrupt. She pushed the folder, a thin, black portfolio, halfway across the table. "This is not about my ego being bruised by waiting," she continued, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of Miles Graham and Orion Sterling. "This is about the fundamental lack of awareness that has metastasized at the executive level. That singular act, the casual dismissal of an inconvenience in your hallway, is irrefutable proof of your detachment and your failure to lead. It demonstrates that you are no longer operating with the necessary vigilance, respect, or strategic awareness required to manage a global entity like Nexus Dynamics." She leaned back again, her face calm, completely unassailable. The justification was complete. It was a performance review delivered in a single, devastating moment, using their own arrogance as the final, damning metric. "You had years to manage the day-to-day operations with the integrity I built this company on. Instead, you built a self-serving echo chamber." Her gaze settled squarely on Dominic, the current COO. There was no emotion in her eyes, only finality. "The time for review is over." Her voice rose fractionally, becoming steel. "You are all terminated, effective immediately." The final sentence was simple, definitive, and stripped of all ambiguity. Dominic's mouth opened, not to speak, but simply to take a sudden, ragged breath. The room remained silent, but the shock that had held them frozen was now dissolving into raw, panicked disbelief. Ariana, having delivered the judgment, sat perfectly still, waiting for them to absorb the unchangeable fact of their professional annihilation. The declaration settled like a physical force in the room, immediately shattering the stunned silence into frantic, desperate noise. Dominic Keller, his face blotchy with denial and rage, was the first to react, leaping halfway out of his chair. "You can't do this, Ariana," Dominic sputtered, leaning over the table, his composure completely gone. "You haven't been actively involved in years. I'm the COO. There are protocols. You need board approval, a vote, a formal review period. You're violating every governance clause we have." Miles Graham chimed in, his voice high-pitched with panic. "This is destabilizing the company. It's market manipulation. We will sue for wrongful dismissal, Ariana. You have no right to unilaterally fire the entire executive wing." Ariana did not raise her voice, yet her controlled stillness commanded attention. She retrieved the thin black folder she had slid across the table earlier and opened it with a precise motion, revealing a single document. "Gentlemen, I have every right," she stated, her voice slicing through their protests. "You seem to have forgotten the specific language of the 2019 shareholder amendment." She read, her tone clinical. Clause 7.3. "The majority shareholder retains the right to immediate, non-reviewable executive termination based on material evidence of negligence, willful dereliction of duty, or systemic failure to uphold the core operational integrity of Nexus Dynamics." She looked directly at Dominic. "Your collective failure to recognize the individual who controls 51% of this company, and your subsequent decision to treat that individual with dismissive arrogance, constitutes a spectacular failure of operational awareness and judgment. That, Mr. Dominic, is material evidence. Furthermore, I have documents here detailing the unauthorized transfer of several R&D budgets into an ambiguous executive travel and enrichment fund. That, Mr. Miles, is a willful dereliction of duty." She closed the folder with a sharp snap that echoed louder than their shouts. Their protests died again, replaced by the sickening realization that she had not acted rashly. She had anticipated this. She had built the legal framework for this day years ago, and she had the evidence to back her justification. She reached for the phone on the table. "I believe your time in this room, and indeed this building, is now forfeit." She pressed a speed dial number. "Dahlia? It's Ariana. I need you and 2 of your security associates to meet me outside the executive boardroom immediately. We have a termination detail." The fear on the faces of Dominic and Miles intensified, turning their entitlement into profound vulnerability. Dahlia Zaki, Ariana's legal representative, was not merely a corporate lawyer. She was known for her absolute ruthlessness and efficiency. Within 90 seconds, The door opened and Dahlia, a formidable woman with sharp, observant eyes, entered, followed by two security personnel. She looked at the scene. Ariana calm at the head of the table, the executives scrambling in various stages of disbelief, and showed no surprise. Collect all personal effects, electronic devices, and company property, Ariana instructed Dahlia, without once looking at the deposed executives. The security detail will escort them directly to their vehicles. Their key cards are deactivated, and their corporate email access is already terminated. They are no longer employees of Nexus Dynamics. As the security personnel moved to enforce the order, the executive wing was enveloped in the cold, efficient chaos of a corporate coup executed with surgical precision. The laughter of 5 minutes prior was a ghost, replaced by the heavy, shameful silence of men being led away. Ariana stood briefly in the now-empty boardroom, the scent of expensive, stale cologne lingering where Dominic and Miles had sat. Her lawyer, Dahlia Zaki, was already on the phone, coordinating the full security and IT lockout procedures, a process she handled with practiced, surgical efficiency. The immediate crisis of the termination was handled, but the real work, the deep, internal cleanup, was only beginning. Ariana needed to know the full extent of the rot. As Dahlia finished the call, the door opened tentatively. It wasn't one of the senior staff, nor was it security. It was a man, mid-level in appearance, carrying a tablet tucked under his arm. He looked nervous, his eyes darting between Ariana and Dahlia, but there was a fierce, protective urgency in his posture. "Ms. Freeman," he asked quietly, stepping back slightly when Dahlia turned a stern, inquiring gaze on him. "I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Silas Rue. I'm the Director of Technical Infrastructure for the North American Division." Ariana immediately softened her posture, recognizing the look of someone operating outside the usual chain of command. "Mr. Rue, I recognize your work from the Q3 architecture reports. You shouldn't be here." "I know," Silas said, stepping closer, lowering his voice further. "But I need to speak to you before the news hits. I heard the commotion and I saw them being escorted out." He nodded toward the hallway. "It's about the merger." Ariana's eyes narrowed. "What merger?" "The one Dominic and Miles were secretly orchestrating with Helios Global. They were using their influence to push a vote through the remaining board members next week. It wasn't about growth, Ms. Freeman. They were structuring the deal to liquidate Nexus Dynamics' most profitable core assets, the cloud architecture and the data science patents, into a new subsidiary controlled by Helios, guaranteeing themselves massive golden parachutes and severance pay, while intentionally leaving the remaining, less profitable operations to sink. Silas spoke quickly, concisely, without exaggeration, the language of a professional delivering verified facts, not rumors. He revealed a series of deliberately misleading financial models and internal memos that Dominic and Miles had circulated only among themselves. They were planning to gut the company, destroy its innovative heart, and walk away clean, leaving thousands of jobs and the entire legacy of Nexus Dynamics in ruins. The extent of their betrayal was far worse than simple arrogance. It was calculated corporate sabotage. Ariana felt a cold wave of confirmation. Her decision to fire them over a moment of disrespect had, in fact, been a preemptive strike against a full-scale corporate ambush. The disrespect was merely the visible symptom of a deep, malignant greed. "I tried to flag these discrepancies through internal audit channels, Ms. Freeman," Silas finished, his voice raw. "But Dominic always shut it down. They were too protected. They had too much power." Ariana realized that she had found her first true ally in the internal cleanup. Silas Rue represented the original integrity of Nexus Dynamics, a commitment to technical truth and operational excellence that had been suffocated by the executive layer. She didn't need Dominic or Miles. She needed Silas. "Mr. Rue," Ariana said, her voice now carrying a weight of shared purpose. "Thank you. You have just saved this company more than you know. I need you to stay right here. We have a lot of work to do." Ariana and Silas Rue were still standing in the boardroom, rapidly reviewing the damning documents Silas had brought, when the first notification hit Ariana's secondary phone. It was a market news alert. Breaking: Nexus Dynamics executive team fired. Founder Ariana Freeman returns in unannounced purge. The news had broken instantly, not through any internal leak, but through the fact that Dominic Keller and Miles Graham had their termination details pushed to their corporate devices the moment they stepped into the elevator, locking them out in real time. Their digital silence served as the confirmation of their downfall. Dahlia Zaki, Ariana's legal counsel, confirmed the immediate, expected fallout. The stock is volatile, Ariana. It's not crashing yet, but it's reacting to the uncertainty. The market hates a vacuum of leadership, and right now, we have just created one at the highest level. Worse than the stock volatility was the internal reality. Panic, fast and viral, was spreading through the floors of Nexus Dynamics. Emails were flying, internal chat channels were exploding, and employees, unsure if they were witnessing a corporate hostile takeover or an internal purge, were freezing on mission-critical projects. This chaos, if left unchecked for even an hour, would be far more damaging than the immediate firings. The company's core operations, the cloud services, the development teams, the data centers, were all dependent on the steady confidence of the staff. We need to stabilize the core systems first, Ariana declared, her focus razor-sharp. She turned to Silas. Mr. Rue, you know the technical infrastructure better than anyone. I need you to ensure that the lockouts on Dominic, Miles, and anyone they were colluding with are absolute. More importantly, I need you to guarantee the integrity of our data and the R&D assets. They were planning to gut this company. We cannot let them execute any digital sabotage on the way out. Silas, energized by the clear, urgent directive, nodded instantly. I'm on it, Ms. Freeman. I can flag all their recent high-level server activity and run a full quarantine on the most sensitive data streams. It will be secure in minutes. Go, Ariana commanded. Don't leave the server room until you have confirmation. With Silas dispatched, Ariana turned to Dahlia. The market can wait 5 minutes. The employees cannot. She looked around the boardroom, now a symbol of decisive action rather than comfortable complacency. She had fired the executives over an act of disrespect, but she had done it to save the company's integrity. Now, she had to explain that to the thousands of people whose jobs she had just destabilized. She had to address the staff directly, bypass the dead executive chain, and prevent a massive crisis of confidence. This was the moment she had to prove that the Nexus Dynamics she had built was not about the names on the door, but the people who showed up to build it every day. Ariana walked with swift purpose from the executive wing, Dahlia Zaki following one step behind, both projecting an aura of contained intensity. They headed not toward the private elevators, but toward the central atrium, the massive, open space where the entire company intersected. The building's energy felt febrile, a silent, anxious buzz replacing the normal corporate hum. Employees were gathered in small, tight knots, whispering, phones held discreetly, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. The news had arrived faster than any internal memo could. When Ariana reached the podium, an elevated, glass-fronted stand normally reserved for quarterly announcements, she didn't wait for a formal introduction. She didn't need one. Her sudden, imposing presence was the only introduction required. She paused, taking in the hundreds of faces looking up at her. These were the engineers, the coders, the data scientists, the logistical operators, the marketing strategists, the people who actually built the value of Nexus Dynamics. You've heard the rumors, Ariana began, her voice cutting through the space, bypassing the usual microphone to project naturally. It wasn't a loud voice, but it was perfectly clear and absolutely commanding. They are true. Dominic Keller, Miles Graham, Orion Sterling, and every executive who reported directly to them are no longer employed by this company. A nervous ripple ran through the crowd. She let the news hang for a moment before delivering the necessary context, bypassing the corporate jargon she knew they hated. They were dismissed for a spectacular failure of judgment, an unearned arrogance, and a deep-seated lack of respect for the integrity of this business. She leaned forward slightly. And for those wondering if this was an overreaction to a scheduling mistake, let me assure you, it was an immediate defense against corporate sabotage. She paused, allowing the gravity of the word sabotage to sink in. Those individuals were planning to gut Nexus Dynamics. They intended to liquidate our most profitable assets, guarantee themselves massive financial payouts, and leave this company, your work, your livelihood, your future, to fail. The quiet fear in the atrium transformed into a low, angry murmur of realization. That plot failed, Ariana stated firmly. Because I am here, and I am the majority shareholder. They underestimated the vigilance required to protect a company like this. Then, she shifted the focus entirely away from herself and onto them. This company was never built on the backs of self-serving executives. It was built on the backs of you. It was built by the person in the server room running diagnostics at 3 a.m. It was built by the technical director who chose integrity over complacency. She signaled slightly, and Silas Rue, who had hurried back from the server room, was standing discreetly to her side, a visible symbol of her immediate change in management philosophy. The management that failed has been removed. The culture of entitlement is terminated, she declared. From this moment forward, Nexus Dynamics is back to basics. We are about merit, accountability, and the relentless pursuit of innovation. I am the CEO again, and I am here to tell you two things that are absolutely true. Your work is safe. Your future here is secure. And Nexus Dynamics is back to basics, and I am back for good. The relief in the room was palpable, bursting forth not as applause, but as a spontaneous, massive wave of cheering. It was a roar of support, a sound of loyalty finally given an outlet, validating Ariana's conviction that the true power of the company rested not in the executive suite, but in the people she was now addressing. The roar of cheers that erupted in the atrium was an affirmation. It wasn't the polite, obligatory applause of a quarterly staff meeting. It was the visceral, overwhelming sound of employees who felt seen, validated, and, most importantly, safe. The sound washed over Ariana, momentarily dwarfing the anxieties of the volatile stock market and the corporate restructuring that lay ahead. She saw faces shining with relief. People who had worried about their mortgage payments and college funds because of the greed of men who had been plotting in secret. Their trust, clearly given, was a profound responsibility. As the noise began to subside, Ariana held up a hand, and the employees instantly quieted. She felt a connection with them that years of overseas management and remote delegation had severed. In that moment, she understood a truth that no financial spreadsheet or legal document could ever capture. Her power was not simply in the percent of shares she controlled. That was the legal framework for her authority. Her true, enduring power lay in the belief of the people standing before her. The loyalty she witnessed was the company's most valuable, non-depreciable asset. The deposed executives, consumed by their own entitlement, had mistaken her absence for weakness and forgotten that the workforce was the ultimate source of strength. They saw the employees as cost centers. Ariana saw them as the engine of innovation. With the crowd still humming with supportive energy, Ariana addressed them again. "Go back to your desks," she instructed, her voice calm now, filled with deliberate intent. "Go back to the projects that make Nexus Dynamics essential. The leadership vacuum is over. I am no longer just the founder who left the blueprints. I am the active CEO. Dahlia Zaki will oversee the immediate operational stabilization, and Silas Rue is now the acting chief technology officer, effective immediately. We will announce a comprehensive restructuring plan within 48 hours, focusing on merit, transparency, and accountability." The swift, decisive promotion of Silas Rue, a mid-level director barely known outside the tech wing, sent another powerful, unspoken message. The old rules of seniority and political maneuvering were dead. Performance and integrity were the only metrics that mattered now. Ariana stepped down from the podium, leaving the staff energized and focused, their panic replaced by purpose. She didn't retreat to the isolation of the executive suite. Instead, she walked the floor, stopping to speak briefly with project managers and team leaders, asking direct, informed questions about current roadblocks and operational bottlenecks, the kind of questions that Dominic Keller and Miles Graham had long ignored. She was gathering data, assessing the actual health of the company from the ground up. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rejuvenated offices, Ariana finally sat in the reclaimed executive seat, the empty chairs of the fired executives around her serving as a constant, stark reminder of the cost of complacency. She had returned to a company on the verge of ruin, not by external competition, but by internal decay. She had rescued it, not by corporate maneuvering, but by an immediate, uncompromising act of leadership that prioritized respect and integrity over political stability. Ariana Freeman was back, not as the founder who departed, but as the active, decisive CEO who rescued her creation from itself. The era of passive management was over. The new era of Nexus Dynamics, lean, ethical, and driven by the unwavering trust between leadership and the workforce, had officially begun. And that is how Ariana Freeman reclaimed her empire, not through gradual consensus, but through a single, stunning act of decisive leadership. The power shift at Nexus Dynamics was complete, proving that while money talks, integrity and respect are the true currencies of corporate survival. Her story is a testament to every leader who knows that the fiercest battles are often fought on your own turf. What do you think of Ariana's move? Was the immediate termination justified? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to see more thrilling real-life stories of power, politics, and unbelievable boardroom battles, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for the deepest dives. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss a new CEO showdown.